Welcome. My name is Heidi Graham, and I am president of the League of Women Voters of Mount Prospect, Buffalo Grove, and Arlington Heights. And before we get started, in the spirit of the season, I just want to talk about a couple of things that I am thankful for. Oh, oops, what did I do? Oh, okay. Is that okay? I totally messed up here. What did I do? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to get back. I don't know what I've done. Where am I? Okay. So hopefully everybody sees this. All right. So we're having a little bit of technical difficulties right now. Okay. So, well, I'm going to just talk about what I'm grateful for and thankful for, and that is my health, Zoom filters that make me look like I've had some Botox done, my husband, my two kids, my two amazing greyhounds. But I'm also thankful and grateful for the League of Women Voters, because without the League, really, I don't think that I would have the skills for advocacy that I have today. And so today I want to talk about something that I would like to ask everybody to advocate for, and that is the Equal Rights Amendment. So I'm going to talk about the past, present, and the future of the Equal Rights Amendment today. So let's get started. So the first thing is, we all love and adore Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she said famously, if I could choose an amendment to add to the Constitution, it would be the Equal Rights Amendment. I would like my granddaughters, when they pick up the Constitution, to see that women and men are persons of equal stature. I'd like them to see that it is a basic principle of our society. I think we can all agree. I want my daughter to recognize and see herself in the Constitution. We will be inaugurating our first female vice president, a first woman of color in the highest office of the land. And this, all of a sudden, people are seeing themselves in that role. It is so important that we all can see ourselves in all of these positions of power. And I believe that the Equal Rights Amendment helps to really pave that way. So where did it start? Most people talk about the fact that Alice Paul wrote the Equal Rights Amendment, and she does get credit for it. Those of us here at League, we love Alice Paul. She would famously pee in people's boots. We think that's pretty awesome as a feminist. She also was willing to go to jail for her what she wanted. And but also in doing this presentation, I found out that Crystal Eastman, I had never heard that name before, and I feel like I'm pretty well versed in the suffrage movement and the Equal Rights Amendment, but these two women wrote the Equal Rights Amendment in 1928 or 23, and that amendment reads, the Equal Rights Amendment is designed to guarantee equal legal, this is not how it reads, but this is what it does. It's designed to guarantee equal legal rights for all American citizens, regardless of sex. It seeks to end the legal distinction between men and women in matters of divorce, property, employment, and other matters. So I have a picture here. This is my grandparents, my dad's mom and dad, Virginia Holly Hoblet and Noel Elmer Hoblet. And they have an incredible story. But the reason that I include them here on this slide deck about the Equal Rights Amendment is that they supposedly got married in 1932. But when I had an opportunity to do some research and read through every last love letter that my grandfather wrote my grandmother, and they were actually married a year earlier, but because she was a teacher, she would have been required, once married, to quit her teaching job. So they hid their marriage for a full year so that they could have dual income and get ahead financially. And the Equal Rights Amendment, obviously, had it been passed at that time, that would not have been the case. So for me, there's a concrete example. So the Equal Rights Amendment does say, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex, and that the Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So 1923, it gets written. 1972, it is finally approved by Congress and sent out to the states for ratification. Woo, yay. Okay, so this is what's known as the second wave of feminism. The first wave being the suffragettes. And now we have the second waves, and they're really working hard to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed. So what do we have? Well, we have support, bipartisan support. It was both Republicans and Democrats, both sides of the aisle were in support of the Equal Rights Amendment, which is why it passed pretty easily in Congress. And then I think most people believed that it would pass, it would get the 38 states, maybe not totally easily, but I think they were fairly confident that this was going to happen. But we have a famous Illini who comes onto the scene, and she, you know, I got to give her credit. She was what I would like to refer to as a badass woman, Phyllis Schlafly, and she forms the Eagle Forum, and she staunchly opposes the Equal Rights Amendment. Why? A couple of reasons. She believed that, and her supporters believed, that the Equal Rights Amendment would undermine homemakers. They also believed, remember in 1972, we were on the heels of the Vietnam War. People were being drafted into that war. And so people who opposed the Equal Rights Amendment did not want women to be able to be drafted. So now we haven't had a draft in a long time. So a lot of people are like, well, that's kind of a moot point, but we have, I mean, President Biden has just announced that I'm pretty sure it's the head of the CIA is going to be a woman. If we look at our military, we have more women in positions of power than ever before. I think women are just as likely to want to sign up and go into the military. So to me, this becomes a moot point at this time. But at the time, this was a huge argument. And so 38 states were needed, and it failed. Only 36 were ratified through 1977. And then what happened was in 1979, they set a deadline, or pardon me, in 1977, they set a deadline that said, if this doesn't get ratified by 1979, it's going to get tossed. That deadline was extended to 1982. But it has never been extended past 1982, and that's important to note. So I'm going to come back to an advocacy piece here in a minute, and that's something to note. 5 legislators passed it, but then revoked their ratifications: Idaho, Kentucky, Nebraska, Tennessee, and South Dakota. South Dakota voted to sunset their ratification. And I had to look that up. I'm like, what? I don't even know what sunset means. But to sunset their ratification meant that as long as it got ratified by 38, they'd stay in the ratification pocket. But if by the deadline, the 38 states hadn't ratified to make it part of the Constitution, then they were going to withdraw their ratification. Okay, so now we're deadline. So what happens? What exactly happens then? Well, then we get hope. In 2017, Nevada decides, regardless of the deadline, they're going to ratify the ERA. And then we start getting this momentum. And famously, next it comes to Illinois. And which is interesting because, as you know, Phyllis Schlafly, who had been the leading person against the ERA in the 1970s, was from Illinois. And so now it's coming to home. And this is where I had my second opportunity to lobby in Springfield with the League of Women Voters. So you can see me here. We're in the car. We're driving to Springfield back in the day when you can get in the car with people and not be masked and go someplace. And we drove to Springfield and we visited all of the legislators that cover our league, which is a pretty wide area because we go from Elk Grove to Buffalo Grove and from Rolling Meadows all the way to Mount Prospect. And we spoke with them and had conversations with people who did not believe the ERA should be ratified. We had conversations with people who supported the Equal Rights Amendment. We saw people there who were lobbying against it, but more people were there lobbying for it. It was really, truly an exciting time. But if it weren't for the League of Women Voters, I would not have been able to have that opportunity or the confidence to be able to go and speak with those legislators. And it really is an empowering thing to do, to speak with your legislator about something that you're passionate about. Well, I want to note that after it was ratified, I remember sitting at dinner with my daughter when they were having the vote and sitting and ticking away those yes votes, yes. Then we have enough yes votes. And I'm, embarrassing my daughter because I was hooting and hollering in the middle of a restaurant. But afterwards, a friend of mine who is now a state legislator, he told me, he said, there were at least 9 votes that were yes, that would have been no. And I am sure and convinced that the reason they changed their vote was because they were lobbied by league members. So this just proved to me that the League of Women Voters, because we are nonpartisan and because when we take a position on issues, we believe that these are not partisan issues, that they're for everyone. It's regardless of what side of the aisle you stand on. They're Republican women, Democrat women, Green Party women, Libertarian women. The Equal Rights Amendment benefits all of those women. So we believe that this is nonpartisan and that when we go and speak, we are able to make great strides. So now we have 37 of 38 who've ratified. And then this year in 2020, the 100th anniversary of suffrage, Virginia ratifies the Equal Rights Amendment. So what the heck does that mean? Does that mean now it's part of the Constitution? Not quite. So remember what I said earlier, that there's a deadline. And so there is a joint resolution, SJ stands for Senate Joint Resolution number 6, which removes the deadline. So I'm going to urge you, and I'm going to give you some addresses here in a minute, but I want you to write, call, or email your legislators and ask them to please pass SJ Resolution 6. There's also the question of the legality of revoking ratifications. Most legal scholars believe Article 5 of the Constitution makes revoking their ratification unconstitutional, but that could very well end up in front of the Supreme Court, which would be interesting. And then finally, we want the archivist to publish the Equal Rights Amendment on January 27th. And President-elect Joe Biden has said that he would make this a priority and that he would get this done early in his tenure. So we're asking you to also write President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris to direct the archivist to publish the ERA. So here they are. Here are your senators and also President-elect Joe Biden's address right now before he gets into office. If you would prefer to email them, there I have included those links, and we'll put those up in the chat as well for those of you who are actually here at this meeting. And then just a couple of key notes about lobbying, and that is keep it brief. Really important. They're very busy. We're all busy, but they have a lot of things being thrown at them from all sorts of different directions. And so keeping it as brief and concise as possible is important. Include a personal anecdote. So the personal anecdote that I used when I went to our lobbyists when we went to Springfield was that I'm a military brat. My dad was a career Air Force officer. I mean, he's featured in the Air Force Museum. You can Google him. And Jerry Hoblet, I am a little proud of him, but he's a famous fighter pilot. And I grew up hearing he'd grab me around the arm and he'd say, "This is my daughter, Heidi. If she were a boy, she'd be a fighter pilot." And I took that as a compliment because I grew up, women could not be in combat positions. They certainly could not be fighter pilots. But I recognize now in my middle age, as much as I love my dad, as much as I don't know that he recognized how limiting that statement was limiting. And that women are just as good in the cockpit as men are. And they're just as good under pressure as men are. They're just as capable as men are. And so the Equal Rights Amendment would help level that playing field at that level. And so that was the personal anecdote that I used. I could also use the personal anecdote that I have a daughter who wants to go into film, and fewer than 3% of all filmmakers are women. We need to see more women in these positions of power. So, and while the Equal Rights Amendment will not force private companies to do anything, because it forces the government to even the playing field, it's like a domino effect. Most people will point to the fact that when the military overturned Don't Ask, Don't Tell and allowed all people, regardless of gender or sexual identity, to serve in the military, and then we had this domino effect where then we had marriage equality, and people, honestly, I have teenagers and they could care less. So that is that. And then the final thing that I will say to you is contact your own legislator. While you may want to contact each and every legislator, in the end, you don't vote for them and they don't really care what you have to say. They are answerable to their constituents. So you're most effective calling and writing your own senators. What they do is they keep a log and they'll check it off, okay, so SJ6, and their assistants go, okay, I've gotten a postcard here, a phone call here, an email here, a letter here. And they count them each slightly differently. So if it's a mass email that all you did was go onto someone's website, fill in your information, and it automatically sends an email, that gets counted less than if you personally write the email and take the time. If you get a postcard that's all pre-filled out and all you do is put your address on it, that will be counted less than if you write a letter, a handwritten letter. That counts the most because it takes the most time, that and a phone call. So the last thing I always tell people to do, it is my job as president. You can always join a group like League of Women Voters. We're 100% volunteer organization, and we absolutely need more fierce and fabulous men and women to help us empower voters and defend democracy. So if that's all I have to say, here's our website. Does anyone that's here have a question? And I know that we're on Facebook. So audience queue. Oh, I've never seen that before. I'm going to stop my share and see if anyone has any questions. Oh, Bill, can you correct Joe Biden's zip code for us, please? And then the question is, what do you mean? How much different modes of communication count? Is there a weighing system? There is. Is it official? No. But what I know from talking to plenty of people who have worked in Washington and who are currently in Washington is that those assistants that are answering the phone, that are looking at those emails, they are absolutely keeping a tab and a tally, and they will count it differently. The other thing about those personal anecdotes, why they are so important, is I've actually seen legislators go on the floor and they will use the personal anecdotes that they've heard from their constituents as a way to sway anybody who may be voting in a way that they don't want them to vote. Another question that we have here. Oh, okay. What you want to put in the email. So you want them to pass, and I will share this again, Senate SJ Resolution 6. Maybe we can get that in the chat. SJ Resolution 6. And we also want them to overturn the deadline. So, which that's what SJ Resolution 6 does, is it removes the deadline. And we want them to direct the archivist to publish the ERA. So direct the archivist to publish the ERA. So those are the two things. And then hopefully Bill is one of our most active advocacy members, and maybe he's got, okay, so Bill thinks that the zip code for President-elect Joe Biden is 20230. Are there any other questions that anyone has? Well, look at that. So exciting. Now that we have, okay, we've got one more question here. Is the amendment referred by any other name? No, I've never heard it referred as anything other than the ERA. And I'll be honest, there's so many people. The reason I'm doing this presentation, one of the reasons I'm doing this presentation is that 4 years ago, I thought we had an ERA. I just thought it passed. I don't know. I just thought that we had equal rights under the law. It wasn't until I became very active in League that I realized that it had never passed. And so that was just my ignorance. But I know I'm not the only one. And I think that it's a common misconception that we had equal rights under the Constitution. And many people believe that we do. I've also heard the argument against the ERA is that it will overturn Title IX, which Title IX does a myriad of different things, but one of the things that it does, the thing that for me is the easiest to understand, is that it makes it so that if my son goes to Prospect High School, and if they decide that they want a lacrosse team, that they can't just have a boys lacrosse team, they also have to have a girls lacrosse team. And I look at my own mother. She was Sporty Spice, and in the 1950s, she was on a basketball team as a freshman in high school. But by the time she was a senior, there were enough boys to create a boys basketball team. And so they canceled the girls basketball team. And so what Title IX does is it prevents that from happening. But Title IX probably needs to be there because we don't have the ERA. So I think it's kind of faulty logic in my mind. But I'm not a lawyer and I don't even play one on TV. This is my understanding of it as I have advocated and spoken to a lot of different people about it. But I think that the marriage equality, the Equal Rights Amendment, let's be honest, oftentimes women are treated differently in courts of law than men are in matters of divorce. And so there are men who will say that the Equal Rights Amendment will actually help them. I do believe that because the Equal Rights Amendment has the term sex in it, that there are people who argue that that wording is problematic, especially in today's time when we recognize that sex and sexual identity are gender identity can be two separate things. But I gave this exact same presentation to the Northwest Suburban Bar Associations, their Women in the Law, and most of those lawyers seem to think that that was not the case. But it is the law. Things are up for interpretation. So, but I believe very strongly that the Equal Rights Amendment, that 2021 is our year, and that we all should be doing now to get that passed. Let's get it out of the way so that we can get down to better work. Because when we are all equal, when we all have a place at the table, we will get better answers and better results. So I so appreciate you all coming today. I so appreciate your time. I know that we're all busy. We are all Zoomed out, and but I appreciate you giving me some of your time. And if that is it, if there's no other questions, I thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have this available on our YouTube page, as well as I think we were able to get it live on Facebook. If not, we'll have it on YouTube. And if you have an organization that you feel like would be interested in either a presentation about the history of suffrage or the Equal Rights Amendment, or if you have a Girl Scout troop, our league does Girl Scout presentations. There are civics badges that we go and do for Girl Scout troops. So we have a lot of services, not just voter registration. So anyway, thank you so much and have a great night.